NL Central is really where it gets kind of funky, if you want to say, with the Brewers having a 7 game hold in first place over the Cubs, Reds, and Cardinals. All 7 games back, and the Pirates only 7.5 games back. They were all four tied at one point on Sunday, I think. But now a three-way tied for second place and a three-way tied for a half game back in the wild card race. However, I don't think that's how this division is going to kind of finish. I think this division is going to finish really tight with all four teams. I think the Brewers are going to kind of not falter, but I think everyone's going to play up to the Brewers, and you're going to see a really tight race for this division, much like we saw with the AL West of last year. And with the Cubs and Reds, you can kind of say the same story, where when they play their best baseball, they're good enough to win this division. When they play their worst baseball, which they have this year too, they're terrible. They're mediocre. So I think if both those teams kind of find a middle of the road of playing their best and worst baseball, which they have a whole half season to do, you're going to see a really close race with the Brewers. I think if they play their middle of the road baseball, they're on par with the Brewers, who kind of play middle of the road baseball. The Cardinals, I think this is their middle of the road. Right under 500.
Yeah.
This is probably what they got. Same with the Pirates, probably what they got, unless their offense can really help out Jerry Jones and Paul Skeens. But other than that, I think this is just a mediocre division with teams that play really good baseball, really bad baseball, but need to play mediocre baseball to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I think this kind of Cubs-Reds race for second, I think is going to decide probably this entire division honestly could decide the rest of the wild cards in the NL if the NL West can't get it together with the Padres and the Giants. And this is a logjam division, as you mentioned, but I think the Reds are this is more what I think you're going to see from the Reds the rest of the season. Missing TJ Friedl for pretty much the entirety of the start of the season, just completely ravaged by injuries, getting guys back. Noelvi Marte started his rehab assignment today after being suspended for PEDs, so he'll be back soon. Jeimer Candelario is finally starting to hit like the guy we paid money to come to Cincinnati. Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, really both locked in right now. The rest of the rotation's really hitting their stride, so I think this team is finally kind of starting to realize what they can be. I think if the final piece for this team would really be Ellie cementing himself as that superstar and hitting like that superstar that we know he can be. And keep in mind, all this is without the Reds' best bat-to-ball hitter, in my opinion, and Matt McClain, who's out for probably the entire season with a torn labrum. They're saying he might come back in late September, but I personally doubt it. The Reds love to overestimate how soon guys can come back a lot of the time. But this Reds team, this Cubs team are both teams with tremendous upside. This Cubs lineup, too, I know they've been kind of in a rut recently, but the potential in that Cubs lineup is definitely there. When Seiya Suzuki is on, when Cody Bellinger is on, if you get good Dansby Swanson as well, the power potential of Michael Busch in that lineup, there's a lot of really good things to like in this Cubs lineup. And then the rotation led by Shota Imanaga, obviously, and then Javier Assad has been really good so far this season. I'm not a Cubs fan by any means, but I would rather be y'all than the Brewers.
Rotation's good.
Honest. I cannot stand the Brewers.
Yeah, I can't either. And you talked about potential, and I just want to touch on a player, and this isn't because I'm a Cubs fan by any means. It's just Christopher Morel has been deemed as one of the unluckiest players in baseball history. If you look at his expected numbers versus on barreled balls, hard hit balls, exit velocity, all these numbers, you think he's a 300 plus hitter with 20 home runs, and he's barely at 200 with like 12 home runs. So, and I was just watching the games, you see it. He hits one on the screws, boom, right at third baseman, right at second baseman, right at right fielder, right at left fielder. I mean, it's hard to watch. And I mean, he can't catch a break right now. So, I mean, he's going to start hitting you. And once he starts catching these breaks, you're going to see some fun with that kid because he's definitely got all the ability in the world.
Yeah. You talk about kind of the leaders of these teams' hitting cores. In Milwaukee, it's William Contreras. Cincinnati, obviously, the pop of Ellie De La Cruz. Pirates, the pop of O'Neal Cruz. Christopher Morel is that guy for the Cubs. He's that young superstar that really can be the pop in this lineup. And I love Christopher Morel. I know he plays on the Cubs, but the dude is just so fun to watch play baseball, and it really stinks to see him as unlucky as he is. Also, anytime he hits one in the air at Wrigley, I feel like it gets caught in the weird Wrigley vortex and gets blown straight back down again. The dude cannot get anything to
Yeah,
fly over
tell
the
me
wall
about it.
despite his tremendous exit velo numbers. So, but that kind of thing is usually the thing that will regress to the mean eventually. So I would expect him to just naturally get hot as the summer moves on. But as far as the final division here in the NL West, I know we talked about the NL Central for a lot there. It's probably the division, obviously, that we're most invested in. It could be one of the closest this year, but the NL West is not
Right.
close. The Dodgers are running away with this. The Padres are just kind of middling in nowhere, right around the same, just above the records of all these NL Central teams. The Giants have been through a horrific bout of injuries recently, mainly Blake Snell, who, goodness, Scott Boras absolutely shafted his clients here. When you look, especially at the pitchers in this division, Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell both missed spring training. Both have been dealing with injuries and also dealing
Yeah.
with being very bad at baseball. And this kind of shows
Yeah,
how big of an impact spring
it's
training
weird,
is for
it's
these
sad to
guys.
watch. But I mean, hey, Boris claimed they were working in a facility somewhere. I guess they need to work in MLB facilities and not the Scott Boris facility, because obviously MLB
Yeah.
teams know what they're doing a little better than Boris. But yeah,
They're working
we
in the
don't need to
Scott
touch a whole
Boras
lot
money
about
making
this.
facility. That's what they were doing.
Yeah, they work in his like basement or something where he just gets to watch it and stare at them sign contracts all day. But yeah,
Yeah.
not a whole lot to talk about in this division. So I guess we'll move on to NASCAR because we had Sonoma last weekend.
Yes.
And what do you think Sonoma was? An average race, good race, below average race? What are your thoughts? I'm curious.
I thought Sonoma was a good race, but also I'm just inclined to enjoy road course racing. I love seeing these guys throw a stock car around a road course. It's always entertaining. It could be a race with not a ton of overtaking, and I would still enjoy it. But this race, you did have ability to pass. I know Sonoma's famous for kind of only having two passing zones on the entire track, but it felt like guys were able to move up and down the field, and a lot of that was due to differing strategies. And nothing makes a road course race better more quickly than differing strategies. It's such a game changer,
Yes.
and you saw it with Kyle Larson at the end of this race. The way he was able to kind of drive back up through the field. The same with Michael McDowell, where you had Chris Buescher in the lead, who for a while I thought was going to win the race, and then just his tires started falling off a cliff, and Larson absolutely flew up through the field. At one point, you thought Martin Truex might win the race, and then his team pulled a Ryan Blaney and ran out of fuel on the last lap. Not that he would have won anyway, because Larson was passed at that point. But such an entertaining race, despite the part in the middle of the race where every driver decided they wanted to see how their car would do as a lawnmower for some reason. But outside of that, very
Yeah.
entertaining race with a lot of good back and forth action.
Yeah, I mean, I think strategy kind of saved this race a little bit because you did have kind of a mess of cautions there for a little bit. And I think the most interesting strategy to me was Chase Elliott's, who stayed out the longest, and he led some laps in there in that little strain because he hasn't pinned yet, obviously. But to me, that was kind of like that reminded me of a call that William Byron and Rudy Fugo would make. Just something out there that
Mm-hmm.
not everyone does and kind of gets the ball rolling. And I do think that if he had pitted and they had got a caution or maybe a caution right before he pits and some guys come in or whatever, but I do think if he pits and then there's a caution a few laps later and it kind of bunches the field back up and he can kind of pass through the field, I think you see a battle between him and Larson for the lead just because they have those newer tires. And then at that point, you kind of race to the end there with two cars. Um, but all in all, good racing towards the end.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up about Chase Elliott because I think if props to Alan Gustafson though for actually trying a different strategy because that's one of the main knocks on him is he has no imagination whatsoever up on that pit box a lot of the time. So props for at
Right.
least trying something. But I think if you put Chase
Yeah.
Elliott on a similar strategy to Kyle Larson, I think Elliott might have been the fastest car at the end of this race if he was on similar footing strategy
Yeah.
wise. And he just seemed on it. This seemed like the old road course Chase Elliott that we were used to before the next gen car. His braking confidence seemed just through the roof. It felt like every time into turn seven, he would just send it on somebody. And it looked like what you used to see from AJ Allmendinger back when he was driving for or the 47 team back in like the mid 2010s of just he was going to outbrake everyone and there's nothing you could really do about it. And this Chase Elliott, I think it's I want to talk about Chase Elliott here for a minute because I feel like it's gone really under the radar. And I know probably not to you as a Chase Elliott fan, but I feel like it's gone under the radar to a lot of people just how good Chase has been this season. He's second in points right
Yeah,
now, and he is Mr. Consistency this season. He is consistently up there in the top
100%.
10, and if not, he's just outside of it. The speed is there every week for this 9 car. This is a locked in Chase Elliott, and I think he's going to be a very dangerous driver come playoff time because of it.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the new playoff format, and the new playoff format with kind of the three race thing is, oh, well, can they either got to win a race or be really good in all three races? Well, if you kind of put the playoff format in the regular season, I think Chase Elliott has moved on in every round pretty much, just because he's been that consistent. Now he does only have the one
Yeah.
win, but I mean, if you're top five in all three races, chances are you're going to move on unless three guys win all three those races and you're just out of the top four or whatever, but you're probably going to move
Well, we
on.
saw it from
And then he
Ryan
just got
Blaney last year. We saw it from
right.
Ryan
And then
Blaney
you,
last year. I think you could see the exact same thing from Elliott this season. It's the exact same type of just relentless
yeah.
consistency.
And when you're consistent like that and you're putting yourself in a position in front of the field, the wins will come. Especially after watching his last lap at Sonoma, where he wanted to get a top five and just mowed through the field. Now he had help with Chastain getting into Bush and Truex running out of fuel, but that last
Yeah.
lap looked like an angry, mean, I'm on a mission. And so Watkins Glen, I'm excited for, and the Roval, two races he's
Oh
got
yeah.
wins at. I'm excited to watch him win at. But we don't want to get ahead of ourselves now. Fox, the final race on Fox, and a lot of people are excited about that. Um,
Hallelujah.
yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm excited. I do like NBC a lot. But also Race Hub is
No more
done for
zoomed
good,
in
which
shots
is
of a front quarter panel.
right. But Race Hub being done is unique because it's the only televised show specifically for NASCAR, especially in a sport where no
Yeah.
one talks about it. It's not on ESPN ever. It's never on First Take or anything like that. Pat McAfee has talked about it maybe twice a year at this point, where he's had Chase Elliott and Kyle Busch on the show. But it was the only show on TV where you could learn about NASCAR news on TV, just on cable, and that no longer exists anymore for Fox or anybody. And maybe we see someone kind of take the mantle with Turner and Amazon Prime coming, because I don't think ABC is going to do something because they don't really do a lot of sports shows. But hopefully Amazon
No.
Prime can put something on Prime, or Turner Broadcasting can do something.
Yeah, I really hope, like you said, something comes out of this because losing any kind of sports show for NASCAR, it's just very discouraging from the pure marketing the sports side of things. And also, Race Hub Radioactive is one of the best just sports show
Yeah,
segments in sports, in my opinion. It's one of the most enjoyable things on a sports show that I like to watch each week. I always look forward to Radioactive, and to see that maybe going away forever is really a bummer. I don't know if they'll still release it on YouTube each week or what the plan is
I
for
hope so.
that, but
I hope so.
just it's sad to see Race Hub gone because even though sometimes I maybe would say it wasn't always run necessarily how I would have done it or the best way, it was still a very informative and good NASCAR show. And so to lose that, not just from Fox, but for the sport completely, I think is an absolute disaster. And also, you see it with the carrying of the truck race or the truck series the rest of the year, where they put up a graphic that said the truck series continues on FS1 the rest of the season. And it said next truck race airing at 8 p.m. on FS2. And so it's already getting bumped to next channels, even though you
Right.
haven't even arrived at a first race weekend yet. So I just think it really is ominous for the sport to see this knocked back and back and back from a premier partner like Fox. And I really hope
Yeah.
that the competition of Turner coming in and of Prime Video coming in is really going to drive them to do better. But I don't know what's going to happen with that. But if we can get back to Sonoma for just a minute here, I want to talk about Kyle Busch because this guy just cannot catch a break right now. He's had so many bad breaks and then finally had a fast car, was driving an excellent race, and then just got bumper carred off into oblivion by Ross Chastain. And it's probably a good thing for the little kids watching that there was no live radio in that moment because I bet he was losing
Yeah,
his
I mean,
mind.
yeah, it's gotten to a point where I feel bad for Chase or for Kyle Busch. And as a Kyle Busch hater, I was a Kyle Busch hater before I was a Chase Elliott fan. like most NASCAR fans were. I just never stood Kyle Busch. But honestly, even when he switched to RCR and he was kind of just at RCR, I was kind of, and he got older, more mature. I was kind of like, well, I know him and some of my drivers have gotten into it, but I'm not a Kyle Busch hater anymore. I kind of feel for the guy now, and I get him. And then he does some things that I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, F Kyle Busch or whatever. But dude, honestly, right now, you just feel bad for the guy. I mean, just I mean, we just talked about Christopher Morel. I feel like they're kind of having the same season where he's doing things and doing things
Yeah.
and doing things, and he just keeps getting slapped in the face or quarter paneled by a watermelon farmer.
Yeah, yeah. I really hope that they can figure it out. It's just RCR. You see them have this kind of speed so few and far between. And one thing that I saw brought up that I hadn't really considered is, RCR did so much development of this next gen car. I think it might have given him a head start, which is why we saw them so good initially with Kyle Busch. But now I think they might be kind of regressing to where just they kind of are as a team, more so resources and commitment wise. And that's sad to see. You really hope that you can get
Yeah,
new injections of life into a team like this, like what you've seen with Brad Keselowski at RFK. But I just don't know that. One, I don't think they're ever going to be able to do that with the anchor that is Austin Dillon dragging that entire team down. Also, people named Austin and RCR, just get them all out immediately. Austin Dillon, Austin Hill, fire them all. What are we doing with these drivers? Austin Dillon is just horrifically slow. If Austin Hill gets wind blown on him the wrong way, he'll kill the driver's entire family. It's ridiculous every week, the immaturity
yeah, it's
from
crazy.
Austin Hill and just the dangerous driving, and this RCR nepotism is just, I'm way past done with it. It's like what you saw from Jack Roush, not necessarily in the nepotism aspect, but just the completely apathetic towards success. It feels like Richard Childress doesn't care if the team is good or bad, and Kyle Busch is just suffering the consequences of that, which, like you said, I about what you were talking about Kyle Busch. I've never been the biggest Kyle Busch fan by any means, but you just feel horrible for the guy right now. You feel like he's kind of stuck in just a lose-lose situation with no real way out. Kind of got kicked out the door at JGR because of Joe Gibbs' son being there in the wings, and just now is kind of stuck, in my opinion.
Yeah. Not to mention, he's out of the playoffs now. With Daniel Suarez and
Yeah,
Austin Cindric both having wins, he is now out of the playoffs. So, yeah, not. I mean, and Kyle Busch has recently said that he's more interested in keeping his win streak alive than he is anything else this year. And at this point, he's probably going to have to keep that win streak alive in order to make the playoffs. And who knows what he's going to do in the playoffs? Probably not
yeah.
much in an RCR car. But yeah, but to finish off Sonoma, one of the most interesting battles we had and kind of what's going to happen was Martin Truex Jr. and if he's going to finish the race or not with his fuel can. What's happening on pit road with these fuel guys, man? I mean, are they like hey,
I
you
don't know.
top it off, like it's going to foam up, but when the foam goes away, you go back to the fountain for some more soda, right? Top it off, guys,
Yes.
top it off.
They clearly don't know how to do that. I don't know if the just fuel calculations are off the past couple weeks or if they're trying to cut it too close or what, but they need to figure it out because this is just inexcusable to happen. I know it's different teams, but to happen 2 weeks in a row to see this is just absolutely insane. And you feel bad for Martin Truex. This is a track that he obviously loves. He always runs well at pretty
Yep.
much and had a chance to win, honestly. I think he probably had the speed. If he could have gotten past Chris Buescher maybe 2 laps sooner, I think he maybe could have pulled a gap to at least be able to defend
Yeah.
Larson, but he ran out of gas anyway, so it didn't really matter. And then one last thing I do want to talk about is I know we didn't have an episode to talk about this last week, but Stewart Haas shutting its doors at the end of the season, and the drivers are driving like it. You can tell they're feeling the pressure. Josh Berry did his best Wii Bowling strike impression into turn 11, causing a massive pile up where somehow no one hit each other, but also everyone wrecked. It was very weird to watch happen,
Yeah.
but then Noah Gregson, I think, was trying to become an off-roader in the middle of this race. I think he went off track 3 or 4 times and just mowed a bunch of grass. So you can tell these drivers and crews are really desperate for new homes. I think 2 of them will end up at front row, probably. One replacing Michael McDowell, and then I expect front row to obtain a new charter as well. So I think 2 of those guys go there. But the other 2, you don't really know where they could go, what kind of spots are going to open. So I think you're going to see these guys maybe drive with more and
Yeah.
more desperation the rest of the season.
No, I mean 100%. They're 100% racing for the jobs at this point. And they know like we've got to perform to do it. Especially Josh Berry, a rookie. I mean, you could look at Josh Berry and go, like that's it. This is one shot pretty much. He could be one and done in the Cup Series, and it sucks for him. So he's really going to press, and it's hard not to press if you're him. But I mean, how well can he handle it? And it's just a tough situation that you hate to see. But hopefully he can bounce out and get a gig somewhere. If not, move down to the Xfinity Series and then come back in a few years or whatever. But yeah, it is sad to see. But what's not sad to see is a new NASCAR track, Iowa. We're not new to NASCAR, but
Well, before we get to the new
back
NASCAR
again.
track, let's talk about a very forgettable burnout from Kyle Larson after this race.
Yeah,
Just a little quick spin on the start finish line, made a little bit of smoke, and then absolutely decimated his mother's eardrums
yeah,
with sound as well, which was a little
4.
funny. But
Give it a 4.
5, yeah, it's
Yeah,
mid, it's lower
yeah,
mid. That's what it is, and I think that's really all there is to
yeah.
say about that. So now I understand you're excited. I am also excited. I will let you talk about Iowa here.
So when we do our picks for a race, we like to look at data of last few races there, races in the Cup Gen, similar tracks, things like this. Well, we really don't have a whole lot to go off of here. I know for as far as what I was looking at when I was looking at who's going to run well here, is I kind of compared it to a more typical Arizona. Arizona's got some funk to it, so it's kind of like, oh, this will be a more standard Arizona. And so, who do I think is going to run well at a track like that? I wanted to go with someone who hasn't won this year and someone who's not consistently up there, because you could throw Hamlin or Larson or Byron up there. But I wanted to go Blaney, so I do think Blaney's going to get a win this year to lock himself into the playoffs, even though he's sitting in a pretty good spot. And I know I've chosen Blaney a lot this year, but I mean, he's going to get it done at some point. Ran well at Arizona last year, obviously won the championship there at Arizona, finishing second. So I think Blaney's going to get it done at Iowa.
I like the Blaney pick. I kind of agree with you. We're kind of thinking along the lines of Phoenix for this race. I also maybe see a little bit of Richmond in this track as well, kind of old Richmond more than next gen Richmond, but I'm going with Tyler Reddick, a guy that is also similarly to Chase Elliott, having a quietly very good season. I know the win at Talladega, but outside of that, just been kind of quietly going about business, is fourth in the point standings right now. And I think this is a track that he could really drive well at. We saw him have great speed at Phoenix earlier this season. Toyota's always
Yep.
good on these short tracks, so I think that Reddick gets it done this weekend.
Yeah, I definitely don't hate the Reddick pick. He runs well at tracks like this, and he's having a great year with, I think, the most top tens out of everybody, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he's got 10 top tens, which is one more
Yeah.
than William Byron with 9. So, I mean, he's very, very, very consistent this year. He does have a DNF, unlike some other drivers, but still, nonetheless, very consistent. What's not consistent, which I love, is the F1 season this year. We've seen a lot of
Yes.
weeks where this happens and then weeks where the opposite happens. So we had an interesting Canadian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen is back on top of, obviously. We knew he was not going to hang around the back for forever, so he's back. We did get Mercedes on pole, or not, he was on pole, but on the podium with third. So break us down Canada.
Yeah, so this was the best race we've had so far this season. I think it will be the best race we see all season. Wet, back to dry, little rainstorm in the middle for some spice, then back to dry again. And this just proves that Max Verstappen winning a race does not make it automatically boring, because there was fighting at the front the entirety of this race. And when will F1 learn that a lack of grip is good for racing? You see it every time there's low grip on a track surface. You saw it with Miami earlier this season. You're seeing it with this race. Low grip puts the result more in the hands of the driver and their skill, and you see the
Yes,
best drivers
100%.
rise to the top here. And Max Verstappen just is the best driver. That's what it is. And people are saying, "Oh, the Red Bull is the best car by far. It's Max Verstappen and the Red Bull." Sergio Perez can't drive the car in a straight line, so it's clearly not that good. So he was on
Thank
the
you.
wall multiple times, broke his rear wing. signed a 2-year contract extension and immediately went, I'm going to blow the entire budget cap on repair bills in one race, y'all. Watch this. He's just so bad. Please give Yuki Tsunoda that seat. He deserves it so much. I know he also crashed, but few people did not crash. And Mercedes this weekend, I think, showed up with the best car they've had all year easily, being able to
Oh
get
yeah,
pole with
100%.
George Russell. And then George Russell could have easily won this race, too. Just got a little bit unlucky with the safety car and then a couple mistakes as well from Russell in some high profile situations. Lando Norris also was leading for a lot of this race, then also kind of got caught out by bad safety car timing. But he mentioned after the race that it seems only fair that he benefited from a safety car to take a Verstappen win in Miami, and now Verstappen benefits from a safety car and takes maybe a Lando win in Canada. So these things have a way of working themselves out. But I tell you what's not working out, and that is Ferrari. Holy cow.
Well,
Neither
not this
car
big
made it
enough,
into
please.
Q3, qualifying 11th and 12th. Then Leclerc had no pace at the start of the race, and I was very confused. He was still ahead of Sainz because Sainz had even less pace
Yeah.
somehow. Neither Ferrari had any pace whatsoever. Then Leclerc comes on the radio and says, "Hey guys, my engine's not working." And Ferrari go, interesting. And so Leclerc goes, "So, how much time am I losing down the straights?" And Ferrari goes, "Sometime." And Leclerc goes, "Just tell me how much time I'm losing." They're like, it's about a half a second a straight. So Leclerc drops like a stone down to the back. Sainz can go nowhere. The Ferrari just missed this track for whatever reason. Then Ferrari go, you know what? I know how we're going to make up our spots. We're going to put Leclerc on slick tires in a rainstorm. And shockingly, that didn't work. He went a lap down, then had to retire the car because of a terminal engine issue. It got even worse. Then, if that wasn't enough for Ferrari, Carlos Sainz just spun on his own and proceeded to do the old sim racing, let off the brake, and roll back into the middle of traffic and take out Alex Albon with him. So they said they wanted Carlos Sainz in a Williams as soon as possible. I don't think that's what they meant at all, but he did it anyway. Absolute disaster class from Ferrari this weekend. And they need to. I hope this was all the mistakes for the year in one race, because I was getting 2020 Mattia Binotto run Ferrari PTSD flashbacks watching this weekend. It was so bad.
Yeah, yeah, and it was pretty bad. But speaking of Williams, I mean, you've kind of talked about Logan Sargeant a little bit, and I think he's got to be done after this year. As much as I want to root for him, being from America, homegrown, I don't think
Yeah.
there's a shot he stays with Williams. Really, to be honest with you.
Yeah. He was maybe up and down whether he was even going to get a chance this year, and then just has not been able to do anything with the car. And honestly, if I'm James Vowles, I'm considering putting Kimi Antonelli in that car after the summer break and see what he can do. Because there's a lot of whispers that maybe he is
Yeah,
Lewis Hamilton's replacement next year at Mercedes. And what better way to find out if he's F1 material than replace a guy who's all he's doing is driving slow and costing you money? Like, Sargent is nowhere.
yeah,
He's never beaten Alex Albon in qualifying. Never. Ever. Alex Albon is not Max Verstappen. He is a good driver, but he is not a guy that should whitewash you over an entire career.
no,
Kimi Antonelli deserves
yeah,
this seat at this juncture, in my opinion. And then if you want to send him to Mercedes, you can bring Carlos Sainz in next year like you want to, or maybe you keep Antonelli in for next year and just see what happens. But I just don't think they can afford to
yeah.
keep Logan Sargent, both figuratively and literally. With the budget cap, you cannot afford to keep Logan Sargent because he keeps destroying the cars week after week.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree 100%. So, like I said earlier, I do think he's done. And I'm just hoping Signs doesn't go there. I'd like to see him go. I know wherever he goes is probably temporary until Audi can get up and going. But I would like to see him in a Mercedes over Williams for sure. But I think is that all we got for F1?
One more thing. Let's talk about French people fighting. And over at Alpine,
That's
Esteban
right.
Ocon and Pierre Gasly are, shocker, not happy with each other. And it was announced before this weekend that Esteban Ocon would not be returning to Alpine next year. And he responded by being faster than Pierre Gasly pretty much all weekend. Then in the race, Alpine said, "Hey, Esteban, why don't you let Pierre by? And maybe Pierre will let you back by later because, teammates." And Ocon was like, whatever, I guess. So he lets Gasly by. Gasly can't really do much. So then Ocon gets on the radio and goes, "Hey, can I have my position back?" And Alpine went, "Lol, no." And then Ocon got really mad at his team, and he left his radio on, and that could have been really bad if he would have just spoken his mind while he accidentally left his radio on. And you could hear Alpine, they came on to the left on radio and were like, "Hey, Esteban, your radio's still on. You might want to turn that off, buddy." And Esteban went, "Whatever," and just switch the radio off. And this team is just a ticking time bomb right now. It's an absolute disaster. Ocon doesn't play well with others usually in general, despite being a really quick driver. And then him and Pierre Gasly's rivalry, I think you could put those two guys in a car that was literally the worst car on the grid. They could be 3 laps down and they would still race like they were fighting for a world championship just to beat the other guy. They both hate each other so much. It was
100%.
never going to work in
Yeah.
a team. I don't know why Alpine is surprised it's gone this way, but they're going to have to figure something out because I don't know that this lasts the rest of the season without it going nuclear at this point.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. They're gonna have to have like kind of an intervention team meeting, like, hey, you're not even gonna be here next year, so let's just stick that while you're here. Let's do some team bonding. Like, I don't know, do y'all play foosball? Like, let's get a foosball table. Y'all want a foosball table or a ping pong table?
Listen,
Whatever
they
y'all want,
they
we'll get.
tried team bonding. They tried team bonding over the offseason. They put them both in go-karts and like reconcile your differences, and then they crashed racing go-karts
Yeah,
together and got
that's
mad
a
at each
smart way to do
other.
that. Like, hey,
Uh,
I know y'all
yeah.
race each other for a living, but to team bond, we're gonna put y'all in race cars and do exactly what y'all been doing. It's like, no, come on. If you're gonna do something like that, make them do like a
Well,
foot race or something. Like, who can do the mile or the Grand Pacer test? Who can do the Pacer test the longest or something like that?
if you put them both running the pacer test, one would deliberately hang back a length and trip the other one. I am fully confident that's what would happen if you had them both do that. But that is actually it for F1 now. Nothing more to talk about on F1 and nothing more to talk about for this podcast. So it was great to be back actually recording an episode for y'all. And
Yes,
for
yes,
once, we
yes,
can
yes.
confidently say we will be back next week. So we will see you guys next week.